All right.
Just water.
And I will. Karen, you started the recording, right?
I would be recording here. It should be doing automatically, but thank you for
I
checking.
think it did. I just wanted to double check, so I
It
did.
is. Thank you. Thanks for checking.
No worries.
Ready to
Okay.
Call the meeting to order.
Great. We'll call to meeting to order the Monday, October 21st, 2024 Water Resource Advisory Board meeting. I will turn it over to Joanna to talk about the virtual rules for tonight.
All right. Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Joanna Bloom, and I'm serving as the technical host for this meeting. We'll start with sharing a few slides of the virtual meeting rules that we follow. These rules are in place to find a balance between transparency with community members and security that minimizes disruptions. We do need a full name associated with each person's participation in open comment, and we cannot unmute you without it. If your full name is not currently displayed, go ahead and try to change it if you would, please. Or you're welcome to send me a I'll give you my cell number in just a moment. There's no chat feature for this meeting. However, the Q&A function is enabled and can be used to address Zoom connectivity questions should you have any. If you have difficulty with the Q&A function, you can text me at 303-817-1742. Members of the public may be unable to control the audio or video features. Video is limited to city officials, employees, and invited speakers only. I will unmute you when you're recognized to speak. If you're on the phone, you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself. You can indicate your desire to participate in open comment by using the raise hand function. You'll find this feature in the participant box, either at the top or bottom of your screen. And if you've joined us by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. I will call your name when it's your turn to speak and announce the name of the next speaker on deck. And after I've unmuted you, you can please say your first and last name, and we'll start a 3-minute timer that will start once you begin your comments. So thanks so much for your participation.
Great, thanks, Joanna. And we can move to the next agenda item, which is approving the September meeting minutes. I read through them, didn't have any edits, issues, emails.
No, no, I did not.
Is there a motion to approve those?
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor? We approve the September meeting minutes. So with that, we can move to the virtual public comment. And let's say we have a number of attendees tonight, so I'm not sure what order we'll go in, but that Joanna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So again, if you would like to speak during open comment, now's your chance. Please do feel free to press the raise hand function. And I will go ahead and try to call in the order that you all raise your hands. And I'll call your full name, and then I'll say who's on deck so you know who's coming. And right now I see 4 or 5 hands raised. You can do that. It won't interrupt comments when other folks are starting theirs. So I see 5. Go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to continue or if you would like to comment. Karen, I'll give you a second to go ahead and put the timer up. And Lynn Siegel is the first commenter. And Lynn, let me get you here.
Hey, thanks, Joanna, for the answer. I want to bring up this energy issue with hot water. Well, they're heat pump, air source heat pump, hot water heaters. And I wanted to know if they use any more water, because as I've told you before, I'm throwing away 90% of my water just waiting for the water to get hot. And they're no faster. But what Joanne said, which was important, is that they use a lot less energy, 5 times more efficient than conventional gas hot water heaters, dramatically low in utility bills and carbon emissions. So this affects, you know, the system of water treatment and the whole, you know, the whole thing that goes on with the use of water. Although, as Joanna said in her own words, although there's no change in water use at the user scale, there's a general recognition that under the water energy nexus, reduced energy use can reduce regional water use tied to power generation. You know, Joanna should be like beyond the city manager. She is like completely amazing the way she thinks. I really can't say enough good things about Joanna Bloom, but to the general public, please, if you have a hot water heater, go out, consider getting a heat pump hot water heater. There's more complexity of the installation. If you get an AO something brand instead of Rheem, it will have a much lower decibel measurement that, you know, you hear sounds, but it would be lower than that of a regular refrigerator. If you get the right brand and you get it installed properly, you won't have too much cold. You can egress the cold air to the outside and dramatically affect our utility. And I'm hoping that we can go with municipalization in 2025. And I also wanted to talk a bit about the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, and the issues of water didn't come up at all. And, you know, this is the limiting factor in our BVCP. It's the main thing. It's the big time issue is water. If we don't have water, you know, look at Gaza and Israel right now. You know what? The straw industry has gone way up because they have to drink from a straw out of puddles, and they have one toilet for 4,000 people, or they could drink out of the toilet, but there's not even any toilet water. So we need to consider what water we have to be able to extremely overpopulate the Front Range. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn, for your comments. I'll go ahead and lower your hand. We have Nancy Trigg, you'll be next, and then Aaron Meshke, and I apologize in advance if I'm pronouncing anybody's name wrong. Give me 1 second, Nancy. Talk. Nancy, you should be able to unmute now.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
I can, thank you. Oops. Nancy, we could hear you, but now we can't. Hang on just 1 second.
How about,
Nancy, yeah, we can hear you now.
okay, great.
Thank
I'm Nancy Trigg. I live on the south side of Edgewood that you all have heard much about over the last year. I wanted to thank the team who actually did do the evaluation under Edgewood that we requested. I appreciate that we were heard and that was looked into. But I did review all the documents, and it sounds like you all are planning, or the intention is to eliminate that option tonight. And I just wanted to weigh in on that before anything is eliminated. I understand that the best decision has to be made, but it feels premature to be eliminating any options right now. And I'm just going to go over my reasons why I feel that way. The first, and again, I might be wrong on my information, but my understanding is that the original plan that was made of this section behind our south of Edgewood, was done around 2017 or 2018. And I believe we're working with numbers that are no longer accurate in terms of cost of this project. I think it's going to be significantly more than what is currently stated in the plan. We also talked to the engineer who worked on that plan shortly after it was released to the public, around 2018, I believe it was. And the engineer we spoke with said that it did not take into consideration the slope which stabilizing the slope, which I don't know the degrees, but it's significant behind the homes, is going to be a huge undertaking that I actually think could put the homes at more risk below it. Additionally, we had a assessment done. We could only afford to have it done for the first 8 houses, I believe, from the church west. But just that assessment alone, there are 262 trees in that section. 136 of those were deemed to be in fair condition and 86 in good condition, as opposed to only 40 that are dead or dying. And I've heard multiple times the plan was to remove dead and dying trees, and to have to remove the number of healthy trees could also put this area at a higher risk for flooding because those trees are stabilizing the area. So I want to ask that that be taken into consideration as well. And then the last thing I want to correct is I've heard multiple times in meetings that these homes are in the high hazard zone, which was true prior to the last flood, but the more recent assessments put these homes in conveyance. They're no longer high hazard. And I know removing these from high hazard has been a part of the conversation, but they're already out of that zone when it comes to Boulder City rules. So I just wanted to kind of set the record straight and ask that no option be taken off the table until the full conceptual design is created with costs and real impact. Thanks.
Thanks, Nancy, for your comments. We have Aaron Meshke next, followed by Lillian Hoods. Aaron, you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Ah, hang on. Sorry, Aaron, try it again. My apologies.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Aaron Meshke. I live in Boulder and represent myself. I have already presented these comments to the Boulder County Commissioners and the Boulder City Council, but wanted to make sure I was able to address my concerns with the Water Resources Advisory Council as well. 3 weeks ago, the EPA lost a landmark case against the use of fluoride in drinking water. This case spanned 7 years, encountering a lot of government and agency meddling and roadblocks along the way, but a verdict was finally issued by a federal court on September 25th. The court deemed fluoridation a, quote, unreasonable risk to the health of children, and the EPA will be forced to regulate it as such. The court found that claims of safety made over 75 years by the EPA, the American Dental Association, and the CDC were in fact not supported by evidence. Here are a couple pertinent paragraphs from the 84-page decision. Quote, the issue before this court is whether the plaintiffs have established by preponderance of evidence that the fluoridation of drinking water at levels typical in the United States poses an unreasonable risk of injury to health of the public within the meaning of amended Toxic Substances Control Act. For the reasons set forth below, the court so finds. Specifically, the court finds that fluoridation of water at 0.7 milligrams per liter, the level presently considered optimal in the United States, and as a side note, also in Boulder County, poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children. The court finds there is an unreasonable risk of such injury, a risk sufficient to require the EPA to engage with a regulatory response. One thing the EPA cannot do, however, in the face of this court's finding is to ignore that risk. As we await the EPA's rulemaking proceedings, policymakers like yourselves need to be asking if we should continue adding a neurotoxicant to our drinking water. Given the lengthy nature of this trial, it is likely the EPA will also drag its feet in directing the removal of fluoride from drinking water. So that's why I'm asking you for local action now. Soon my family's water will come from a well, and I will bypass this whole fluoride issue. Even though this will not affect me personally, I am choosing to engage for those in our community who do not know about the harmful nature of fluoride or cannot afford the extra steps it requires to remove this neurotoxicant, as well as other endocrine disrupting chemicals found in Boulder's water. This precedent-setting decision is enough for city officials to fast-track the immediate removal of fluoride from our water supply. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Next up, we have Lillian Hoods, followed by Dennis Bashline. Lillian, you should be able to speak now.
All right, can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to speak to the Upper Goose Creek flood mitigation project as a parent, a property owner, and somebody who lives along the creek in the high hazard zone. And also as a gardener and somebody who's really passionate about native plants and landscapes. And so first, as a parent and a property owner, I'm very grateful to the city for taking the time and spending the money to mitigate the risk to our family and home. My husband was in the house in the 2013 floods, and we have to discuss an evacuation strategy every time it rains. I know the city has faced criticism and opposition, and I'm very grateful that they've nevertheless pushed to protect families like mine. But I do understand that some of the more vocal opponents to the plan for Reach 6 don't own property in the high hazard zone, and that those folks might be more concerned about the wildlife, plants, and trees along Goose Creek. And so I also wanted to speak to the project as someone who spends a lot of time working in her yard and garden, which both abut the creek, and who's passionate about encouraging native plant species and the birds and animals to which they provide shelter. Long story short, and this is knowledge gained from many hours just trying to slash through shrubbery in my backyard, but the Goose Creek Channel is clogged with invasive plants and non-native species. The Russian olive, split willows, Siberian elm, buckthorn, and multiflora rose along the corridor are aggressive. They choke out the native plant life. And I know this again because I've been trying to battle them back in my own yard. Removing them will allow for native plant species to proliferate. And having seen the city's work in other parts of Boulder, I'm very confident that the city will in fact transform Goose Creek from what's now an overgrown urban drainage into a thriving native habitat. In short, I'm very grateful again, both for the city's efforts to protect me, my husband, and our 3-year-old daughter, and for their sensitivity to the very beautiful and unique corridor behind my home. I genuinely appreciate their consideration of alternative solutions, but before we go into another flood season, I just urge the city to avoid any additional delays so that we can more swiftly protect life and property, and so that we can, as soon as possible, allow for space and time for those native plant species to fill in the corridor. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Next up, we have Dennis Bashline. And Dennis, before I unmute you, I just wanted to say for the benefit of others on the meeting, if you did want to speak, this is the last person with their hand raised, so please do virtually raise your hand if you would like to speak. And if you can't see the raise hand function, you're welcome to text me at 303-817-1742 with your name, and I will try to mute you or unmute you when the time comes. In the meantime, Dennis, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
I'm unmuted and my wife is on my computer, so it's actually Peggy Bashline speaking.
Great, thank you. Go for it, Peggy.
11 p.m., 9/11/13, the memories are engraved. I cannot argue the desire to control and protect. In the early 80s, I literally froze at the wheel while floating down Arapahoe in my Buick during a raging downpour of hail and water. I understand the fear. No one will ever know all that is weather and water. In 1988, Boulder's flood experts attempted to physically remove all houses along South Edgewood. They proposed our homes would flood and float, but they did not in 2013, experiencing little to no damage. Once again, we received cyclic punishment, now asking us to accept and receive, not exit, potential floodwaters. The city was wrong with its past predictions and suddenly wants to change its mind, using us as an experiment just 50 feet from our back doors. Are they actually trying to have us flood with such an about face? The reality is nobody can begin to guess the location and dumping concentrations weather will offer at any moment. Consider North Carolina. Yes, neighbors considered in the safer flood zones along Floral and other areas experienced damage, but to now attempt to pass the brunt to Edgewood residents is unconscionable. For decades, we have lived with the city's most dire of predictions. Oddly, the exact opposite and what our private surveyor proposed and composed in writing in the early 90s is exactly what occurred. The city was wrong. With agendas unknown, my local government offers no source of trust to this member of community who has watched, lived, and learned from the repeated attacks to acquire this small strip of property. I cannot wrap my head around the fact my city wants to demolish an entire thriving wildlife corridor. All the talk of global warming and the environment related musings of what Boulder deems fact now appears in the forefront, a hypocritical farce. I do not understand how over 300 corridor supporters gathered in record time means nothing as their wishes fall on robotic blind eyes and deaf ears. Not one of the hordes of people I have solicited see an ounce of merit in disrupting or destroying the healthy, mature trees and expansive land behind South Edgewood. We all know in one way or another we're sitting ducks, part of the herd, and vulnerable to any number of tragedies. To my city, our plans are providing irrefutable hope. Remember the Buick.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks Peggy and everyone. And as I know we have our information and presentation on Upper Goose Creek later, but want to give Joe a chance if you want to respond to any of the public comment. And just remind folks that because it's an information, no additional public comments. So if you do wish to speak tonight, now is the time to do it. Joanna mentioned that, but I just want to reiterate that and see if anyone else wants to jump on, but I'll pause and see if Joe has anything you want to respond to.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. And I'm Joe Tadiucci. I'm the Director of the Utilities Department. And Joanna, you can keep an eye on the hands, and if there are others who want to participate in public comment, we can leave it open. But might want to comment on a few of the things, and then some of the other things I think will be covered in the presentation. The first speaker, Lynn, mentioned the importance of water in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. I'll be talking about that a little bit later in tonight's agenda under matters and upcoming schedule. There was actually a kickoff event this weekend for the comprehensive plan, and that will be a big work item for city staff in the next few years. And then the second speaker, I believe, Nancy, appreciate the feedback from all the speakers, by the way. And Nancy commented on a number of things. I think some of them will be covered in the presentation. Our discussion tonight will focus on taking a second look at a piped alternative under Edgewood Drive. But as far as the project that goes forward, no decisions have been made yet in the design about the number of trees that may or may not need to be removed. And whether we do the piped alternative or the channel alternative or some combination, there will have to be some trees removed, possibly on in the front yards of people if it's the Edgewood Drive piped alternative, as well as in the stream channel. For some of these projects, there's no way around that. And then Aaron, appreciate the feedback on the fluoride issue. Our team has been following that closely. We're aware of the court case. We're currently meeting the regulations and recommendations for fluoride addition to our drinking water. And that was something that was actually approved. It's part of our charter and city code. It was approved by voters back in the 60s, I believe, the addition of fluoride. So we'll continue to monitor the regulations closely, and should they change, we'll change what we're doing as well. And to do something other than adding fluoride or removing it, I think we would have to go back to the voters for that. So just a few thoughts on that. And then with regard to the last speaker, Peggy, appreciate the input and the feedback. And I know the concept of the disturbance and the potential removal of trees that I just mentioned is unwelcome news on projects like this. And I remember meeting with a group of community members who represented the Edgewood interests, and we talked about the geography and the topography of the area. And if you think about Edgewood Drive and the creek that is to the south of it, if you were heading south to north on 19th Street, there's a four-way intersection to the south, that is Bluff Street. I'm really challenging myself with directions, and that represents kind of a high point. And then you go down into a valley, and as you continue to the north, there's another uphill that you go up. And when we talked with a group of community members, there seemed to be consensus that that was the river valley or the Goose Creek drainage. And so the water, just by physics, have to come through there somehow. And there are options that we can look at. We'll be talking about one tonight, but those are some of the basic realities that we have to deal with in managing floodwater in this area. So I think I will leave it at that, and I'm not sure if others.
Any other people jumping on, Joanna?
I haven't seen any raised hands or gotten a text, so I think you can close open comment.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the engagement. And hopefully everyone can stick around for the presentation, at least those interested in the Upper Goose Creek project. And with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Joe, to go to the information item.
Yeah, I have a few brief comments to introduce this item, and tonight we'll be talking about the Upper Goose Creek and 2 Mile drainages, and specifically an alternative that we looked at for Region 6 of the Goose Creek drainage that has been a topic of a lot of public interest. Appreciate the community members who are here tonight. Board members might remember that we had an approved flood mitigation plan for these two combined drainages as a single plan that City Council approved in 2023. And it really centered on flood improvements to the natural stream channel in Region 6. However, in response to community concerns and feedback, we decided to take another look at whether the floodwater could be conveyed in a pipe under Edgewood Drive instead of the natural stream channel. And the hope of that approach was that it might eliminate some of the impacts to the natural stream corridor. And this was not something that was council directed or anything like that. This was my direction, something I asked the team to look at in response to community feedback. And one of the community members mentioned a decision tonight. There's actually no action that the board needs to take tonight. This is just an information item, and we're presenting our findings on the analysis that we did, and we thought RAB would be an appropriate venue to present this information. So Debbie Fisher is our senior project manager for the Upper Goose Creek and 2 Mile flood mitigation project, and she'll be leading our presentation tonight. And Debbie, you can go ahead and get your slides up on the screen. And she'll start out with a bit of background and context just to get us oriented and reminded of what this project and what the drainages are. And then she'll talk about the specifics of the piped option that we looked at. And then I might close us out tonight. So that's what we have in store. And this is always the moment of truth. Will the technology cooperate or won't it? So by the way,
Good.
Signs are good so far.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate the introduction. So this will be about a 15-minute presentation. And we've saved quite a bit of time to answer answer questions and so forth. And we already covered virtual meeting part, so just another quick introduction. Tonight, purpose of this presentation is to provide background and updates for the Upper Goose 2 Mile Canyon Flood Mitigation Project, and then timeline for some next steps. We have just a few things on the agenda. Short introductions, history, some project updates, and then time for questions and so forth. So introductions, my name's Debbie Fisher. I'm the Senior Project Manager in the Storm Flood Group for the City of Boulder, and I will be the project manager for this particular project. You've already met Joe Tadiucci, our Director of Utilities, and Brandon Coleman is also here tonight. He is the manager of the Storm Flood Group. Also wanted to point out that we actively work with many organizations outside the City of Boulder. One of those partners is the Mile High Flood District, which is an independent special district that assists local government in the Denver metro area with drainage and flood control. And Icon Engineering has been instrumental to date in helping us with the mitigation planning. So we will cover a quick history of flooding in Boulder, and in particular in this watershed. The city's stormwater and flood management utility uses a life cycle approach to addressing flood risks throughout the community. This approach starts with floodplain mapping to identify risk, followed by mitigation to select the preferred project alternatives, and then design and construction. Mapping is then updated to reflect the new floodplain with mitigation projects in place to continue the cycle as needed. Design has not yet begun for this project. The upper parts of 2 Mile Canyon and Upper Goose Creek watersheds are located north and west of city limits and are covered by a variety of rock outcroppings and are vegetated with grasses, trees, and shrubs. From the city limits, creeks are characterized by steep topography and dense residential development adjacent to the creeks, with limited capacity to convey floodwaters. In some places, the creeks disappear altogether and floodwater travels over roads and through properties. This red line is the approximate boundary between the two watersheds, and the yellow star represents the westerly edge of Edgewood Drive at 19th. Flood flow in the two creeks behaves in significantly different ways. In 2 Mile Canyon Creek, concentrated high-velocity floodwater pours out of the mouth of the canyon at Linden Street, creating a flash flood. Flood flow from Upper Goose Creek flows in multiple paths before ponding in North Boulder Park and continuing eastward, spreading throughout neighborhoods. They come together near Folsom Street and continue easterly to Boulder Creek. The map shows the approximate flooded areas from the 2013 flood. And these photos give a glimpse of how severe that was in the watershed. Most flows could not get to the creek due to the unusual nature of the flooding event, debris, and undersized storm sewer, resulting in floods being conveyed along streets and through private properties, causing severe flood damage. Because of the differing behavior of the two creeks, the storm was estimated as a 100-year storm event in the upper reaches of 2 Mile Canyon Creek and a 25 to 50-year storm event in the Goose Creek Basin. Another way to quantify these storm events is that the 100-year storm has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year, and a 25 to 50-year storm event has a 2 to 4% chance of occurring in any given year. The urgency of the Upper Goose Creek 2 Mile mitigation plan was reinforced by even more recent flood events in 2018 and in 2023. The mitigation plan was recommended by RAB in March of 2023 and approved by City Council in May of 2023. The plan included extensive outreach and engineering and identified protection for over 500 homes from the 100-year flood for an estimated construction cost of $43.2 million. At the request of City Council, a robust community outreach effort was undertaken to reintroduce the mitigation plan, gather input, and to inform the community of the results. The storm flood team hired a communications manager who has created multiple forms of communication, such as website updates, mailings, flyers, and an email address specifically for questions and comments about our flood projects. We did even more. We instituted open office hours and held community meetings in local schools, offering more in-person opportunities to engage with staff and ask questions. From our outreach efforts, we gathered community interests that are extremely important to our flood projects. Everyone wants to understand the level of flood protection and the accuracy of data used to predict flood extents. Of course, there's a sense of urgency for flood protection. Every project has impacts as the project is taking place. We recognize that wildlife utilizes the areas in and around existing creeks, and there are key nesting and denning times. Mature native trees are a valuable resource and will be surveyed, evaluated by an arborist, and protected whenever feasible. Native riparian vegetation and trees will be replanted. Full restoration after construction to an even better, more sustainable riparian habitat is a major goal of stream projects. Construction is not a pleasant experience, but it is temporary. It causes disruption to traffic and temporary inconveniences. There are concerns over phasing and duration. Often acquisition of additional easements are required, whether temporary for construction or permanent for ongoing maintenance. Projects can be close to backyards and homes. Maintenance is always required after it is all done. The more resilient the project design, the less maintenance is required. Taking all these concerns into consideration in the selection of alternatives, where is the project going from here? Let's take a look at some project updates. Key project goals align with the comprehensive flood and stormwater plan adopted by the city in 2022. Among these are to protect life and property by reducing the extents of the high hazard zone and the 100-year floodplain. To minimize impacts to private properties and wildlife as a result of the proposed improvements. And to provide variable natural looking features representative of the upstream natural watershed. This means mimicking the natural variability of the creek wherever feasible, and developing a unifying aesthetic along the creek corridor. Ultimately, these goals come together to design a high-functioning, low-maintenance stream that is resilient to flood events for a long time into the future. To provide this high-functioning, low-maintenance stream, nature-based design has been shown to be the best sustainable solution to flood control. This QR code will take you to a presentation on nature-based design on our website. In Boulder, the plan is to accommodate floods rather than controlling them by focusing on natural stream processes whenever feasible, to construct resilient infrastructure that is adaptive to changing climate conditions, and to protect and restore the natural streams where they still exist within the city. Keeping in mind the goals of the city, the Upper Goose 2-mile mitigation plan explored several alternatives with community input, such as detention, open channels, and pipe systems. These alternatives were evaluated and scored to determine the chosen alternatives and level of flood conveyance for 4 reaches and in 2 Mile Canyon and for 6 reaches for Goose Creek, as indicated on the map. The first phase of the mitigation plan is the lower reach of Goose Creek, shown here as Reach 6. This reach is currently an open channel with less than 5-year capacity, situated between the homes along the south side of Edgewood Drive and the hill to the south. Except for a short section on the western end, the creek is almost entirely south of the properties along Edgewood, lying mostly within the properties on the hill. The approved mitigation plan recommended a restored 100-year open channel along the existing creek. Within Reach 6, we can see there are 51 structures in the 100-year floodplain, 29 of which are in the conveyance zone. Edgewood Drive and 19th Street are in the high hazard zone. Additionally, portions of the creek are in need of restoration. As a reminder, the conveyance zone is the minimum space required to carry the volume of the 100-year storm event. The high hazard zone is where the combination of depth and velocity produces the danger of cars and people being swept away. The approved mitigation plan alternative recommended improvements to the existing creek along Reach 6 to provide a 100-year flood conveyance with some localized upstream stormwater improvements. Since this reach is at the bottom of the watershed, this project is needed to be able to accept floodwater from upstream in the rest of the watershed. Reach 6 is characterized by a steep slope belonging to the properties to the south, dense vegetation along the creek and limited access through private properties. The majority of the creek lies within the properties on the hill. Most of the homes along Edgewood Drive were built decades ago prior to the implementation of modern floodplain regulations, thus finding themselves in the floodplain. The tight corridor that remains only has the capacity to convey approximately a 5-year event, forcing additional floodwater into the streets and private properties. A piped alternative along Edgewood Drive was briefly considered in formulating the mitigation plan, but deemed infeasible and not pursued. Subsequent to City Council's approval of the mitigation plan, there were significant community concerns about the channel approach in Reach 6. As a result, the city agreed to revisit the concept of a piped alternative along Edgewood Drive. The city hired Icon Engineering to take a more in-depth look at the feasibility, constructability, cost, and the pros and cons of a piped alternative versus the open channel alternative. Looking east at the cross-section of Edgewood Drive, width of the street is 40 feet. With one travel lane in each direction, a bike lane, and parking along the south side. To adequately convey the required flow in the piped system, the only feasible solution is a shallow system of box culverts that can tie back into the existing creek. A deeper system cannot ever reconnect at the surface back to the creek downstream. To carry the existing flow would require 8 parallel 4x4 foot box culverts, each approximately a half a mile long, for a total width of 40 feet, requiring excavation of the entire roadway. This would cause major traffic and access disruptions for a year or more. Because the culverts interfere with the existing sanitary gas and water mains and services, which cannot remain under and across the box culverts. New sanitary sewer, gas, and water mains would be required on each side of the street under the front yards of the homes on both sides, resulting in service interruptions. Additionally, trees, sidewalks, and fences would need to be removed for the utility main construction, and trees and fences would not be able to be put back over the tops of the pipes. A major consideration is that even with the culverts, the pipe system cannot capture all of the water from Goose Creek because the existing creek is much lower than the elevation of the required box culverts under the street. Approximately 20 to 25% of the floodwater will continue down the creek. Repairs and improvements along the existing channel are still needed to provide capacity for the portion of the floodwater that will not be intercepted by the pipe system and to stabilize the banks that were eroded during the 2013 flood. The estimated cost for this piped alternative is $58 million. Maintenance requirements would be frequent to do inspections and remove sediment and debris. To summarize some trade-offs, here's a comparison of key project considerations for both the open channel and piped alternatives. Flood protection, both the open channel and the piped alternatives, along with the required channel rehabilitation, would convey the 100-year storm event. Cost. The cost estimate is $12 million for the channel and $58 million for the piped alternative. The piped alternative still requires creek rehabilitation and total replacement of Edgewood Drive and all of the utilities in the street. Impacts. We considered impacts related to construction, to wildlife, to the neighborhood, and to future maintenance. Focusing most of the construction at the surface along the creek is safer and less complicated with less long-term maintenance. Pipe systems collect debris and sediment and require frequent cleaning and maintenance, and ultimately total replacement. Piped alternative would require a larger construction footprint with massive excavations, multiple pipes and culverts, longer construction time, and cause major disruptions to the neighborhood, including existing utilities and access. Unfortunately, the piped alternative would not eliminate the need for channel rehabilitation in Reach 6, although the footprint of the channel would be slightly less. And environment. In either case, construction in the existing creek would be necessary to repair existing damage and restore capacity for the flood water that cannot be captured in the piped system. This will temporarily disrupt the ecosystem of the creek and require the removal of some existing trees and vegetation, particularly non-native and invasive species. Reconnecting the existing narrow creek channel to the wider floodplain restores natural stream functions and processes that support a more robust aquatic riparian native habitat, provide water quality benefits and future resilience. Adding the piped alternative would also require tree and vegetation removal along the street. Pipe systems do not provide any water quality or habitat benefits. The high velocity and flood volume at the exit of the pipes into the creek would require substantially more armored erosion protection. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Joe Tadiucci to wrap up and take any questions and concerns that you may have.
Thank you for that, Debbie. And kind of going back to my introductory comments, that again, this is something that I asked the team to look at, and we engaged a consultant and had them do the analysis. And the objective was to look at this piped alternative, that placing the pipes under Edgewood Drive, would it work in a way that's reasonably comparable to doing it in the natural channel instead, and could it eliminate that work? And I believe the team really took it to heart and looked at it in good faith and objectively, and the findings, unfortunately, that it was not comparable. And I may or may not ask Debbie to go back a few slides here, but I think the biggest thing for me, a lot of it can boil down to opinions and preference, like it's 5 times the cost. Well, that in our city's values, that may be worth it. And so we might advance an alternative if that was all there was to it. But I think what we found is that the elevations don't work. And this is the key point, just the physics of the creek drainage, and you can't get the water from the Goose Creek drainage into the inlet of the pipe, because the elevation of the inlet of the pipe has to be higher. And for this type of situation, floodwaters, there are parts of utilities where we use pumps and things like that, but we can't do that for this magnitude of flow. And so what that means is you would have to build the pipes that Debbie showed in that cross section all the way across Edgewood Drive. And you would still have to do channel work in the creek. It would have to be a combination of the two things. For me, and I know one of the community members asked that we don't take anything off the table. But it actually, when you think about that and just knowing how hydraulics work, it's not that with a lesser flow, the amount of channel disturbance is proportional. You still end up with a significant component of what you would have if you put all of the flood flow in the channel. And then you have all of that disruption to Edgewood Drive and people's front yards as well. And so, again, this was not something that City Council asked for, something we did on our own to be responsive to feedback. The community members who have organized around this asked us to look at 5 things. This was one of them. But I think primarily because of the physics of the situation and not being able to get all of the water into the pipe, we just don't feel like it's advisable to fix this, especially when you consider it's 5 times the cost and probably doubles the disruption to the impacts that people would experience. So that is, I think that is where we're landing on this. And Debbie, I was going to ask you to go back to slide 20. If you can do that. I know you have animation, so that might be 400 clicks, but if we can get there quickly.
There we go. That's the
So,
one you wanted?
yeah, I think this is a good view. And one of the public commenters talked about the slope stability. If you look at that large green area, that's a pretty steep slope. And there are concerns about if we do work in that channel, are we going to make things worse? I think there are already stability concerns in its current configuration, and that is one of the things that we would work on in final design. But this is a good vantage point for the situation, and I think everyone can see where the natural stream channel is, and then the primary road is Edgewood Drive. And you can kind of tell from this figure at the far end of the photo, Edgewood Drive appears to me to be higher than the creek channel. And that's the issue. You can't get the water to divert from the creek channel into this shallow pipe because the elevation of the inlet has to be higher. And that is because of the way the downstream connection has to work. It's not a matter of preference or just how we want to do it. It's a fact. So that's kind of where this puts us. And now if you'll go back to the timeline slide, thank you for working with me to get back to that. So where that puts us, we wanted to do this update and share the information both with the community and the board. And it would be our intention to now start working on the design, and the first step would be hiring a consultant to work with us on some of those details. And I imagine we would have alternatives that we could work with the community for the channel configuration and the slope stability and all of those things, and opportunity for the public to weigh in on that. But that's the timeline that you see with design happening in 2025 and 2026. And the desire to go to construction in 2027. And regardless of which alternative we brought forward, I know one of the other requests that the community members made was just looking to the city for guidance on how easements and those kinds of things work. There basically were 5 different requests that they made, including this Edgewood Drive alternative. And we have either done the 5 or the remaining items, we intend to do them all. So plan to work with the community on that. I think that's what we have, and the next slide is probably just queuing up the questions if the board has any.
Yeah.
Great, thanks Debbie and thanks Joe, and really appreciate that presentation. I have a couple of questions, I'll turn it over. Anyone else has questions? I'll go first.
I have one clarification question. Again, I think you mentioned it was 20 to 25% of the floodwater that wouldn't be captured by the culverts, is that right?
Yes,
Okay, and is that like regardless of the amount of flow, that's just the percentage that it wouldn't capture? Okay,
correct.
cool. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't like dependent on flow amount or anything like that. It was, that's the gap. Period. Okay, cool.
Right, which equates to around 500 CFS out of a total of about 2,000 CFS that needs to be conveyed altogether. That's a significant flow, and as Joe mentioned, it's so much lower than the pipes under the street. The only way to get it up to the street would be to pump it with massive pumps, like on the order of the ones they use in New Orleans from Lake Pontchartrain. And that's not really a great stormwater solution for Colorado.
Thanks.
I don't.
I was just curious, I know the plan includes also the floral alternative that city council recommended pursuing. I'm just curious if that's a similar type of.
Similar size, is that what you're asking?
Similar size, similar construction impacts, similar everything to what you just presented on the under the Edgewood alternative.
It is similar, it would be done in box culverts, but we actually did have Icon take a look at the design to do that and whether it was feasible or not. It is definitely feasible. It's a lot less flow because it's only capturing a portion of 2 Mile Canyon Creek, the part that basically spills across Broadway and down Iris. Things that fall south of that are not interceptable by that particular system to get down Floral Drive. But as I recall, it would have been probably about half, a third to a half the amount of box culverts that we were showing here for that quantity of flow. And it was a very conceptual look, so that's a rough number, but it is feasible. And that is actually our intention, to take that flow down Floral. But unfortunately, there will be the same kind of disruptions to Floral Drive for the people living along there. Not quite to the extent, because we won't need the entire street.
And with that option, it has to come down one street from another and be in a pipe, so it's not the same comparison. Advancing the Floral Drive option was one of the 5 things that the community members asked us to do, and we intend to do that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It would either be down Floral or down 19th, and it would be similar size culverts either way.
And then Joe, you alluded to this, and Debbie, you'd mentioned this, that if you did the under the Edgewood alternative, the footprint of what's needed to rehabilitate the creek itself, I think Debbie said would be slightly less than if you didn't do the piped alternative. Can you provide any numbers to that, of what slightly less means?
Not really, not at this point. We've not really done any conceptual designs. The creek should still be improved to carry that 500 CFS or so at a minimum. And Joe could probably speak to this, but it's the same size equipment, the same environmental studies, the same level of engineering. All those things remain the same. So if you want
Yeah,
to
and
speak more to that.
And without any numbers and just what I know about hydraulics and how channels work and Debbie and Brandon are far enough away that they probably can't throw anything at me, but I would guess it would be 2/3, maybe 3/4 the size of the full channel without seeing the analysis.
Yeah, it's deceptive. For instance, a 5-year storm event is typically around 40% of a 100-year storm event. And a 50-year event is close to 3/4, if not more, of a 100-year event. It's not a linear percentage.
And so that bring our recommendation for not advancing this is when you throw all the costs and the impacts to Edgewood Drive on top of that disturbance too, it just doesn't make sense.
I have two more quick questions if you don't mind. So design construction was 2025, 2026. When can property owners on Beach Six expect to be engaged by the city on design and talk to about easements and all that stuff?
Good question.
Right.
Somewhere around maybe the middle to end of 2025, we would have done some. There's a lot of data to gather. First, we've got to do surveys and we've got to do an environmental study and we've got to start talking to the Army Corps of Engineers and look at wetland permitting and get that all started and all that sort of thing. And that really, that's just the beginnings. And then we would hire a consultant, or actually several consultants. There will be a geotechnical consultant and an environmental consultant and a civil consultant and a flood consultant, and the Mile High Flood District will be involved. So I'm anticipating by the time you pull all those people together and we decide who's going to do what and when they're going to do it, we're probably looking mid to end of 2025 before we would even have any inklings of a conceptual design.
I agree with what Debbie is saying there. And we're actually going through that process right now on the Gregory Creek flood mitigation plan and working with those property owners on easements. And I think we have to look at alternatives now for this approach. Probably working with the community members on some of that. And the design has to get to, I don't know, 30-50% probably before you know what the footprint is potentially gonna look like and which properties are impacted, and then we can start having those conversations.
So maybe a year from now, people can expect to. Okay.
Very likely about a year, maybe a little less.
What was the basis for the estimated cost for the channel solution, the more natural?
Icon did those estimated costs based on 2023 construction costs for similar projects working with Mile High Flood District. And I think those cost estimates are listed in the large memo that they put together. Also have that here. Point to it. I think I might be able to find it.
I think that's probably okay.
Yeah, I have it. I do have it open.
Yeah, it is in here. It's on page 11, pages 10 and 11 of Icon's report.
Last question for you, just do you have are you able to provide the cost of this under the Edgewood analysis?
Sure, yeah, we spent about $85,000 on the consulting work. A few years ago, we had a similar situation with the South Boulder Creek flood project. And were asked by the community to look at a different alternative, and we did that, similar costs.
Okay. Any final questions from the board? Yeah, really appreciate the update and the analysis, and thank you for the presentation, Debbie. Appreciate taking your questions. And with that, we can move to the next information item.
Yeah, and before we move to that, I do appreciate the community members who attended tonight for the Goose Creek update and realized that this was not the news people were hoping for. And we look forward to working with everybody on how to advance this going forward. So I'll probably leave it at that. And it sounds like there may be some community members that have their hand raised. I think there's not really a public comment opportunity at this point, but people can for sure email the board and staff if they'd like to provide additional perspective on this. And now for something completely different. So the next item, and I may have some comments at the end, but the next item relates to some proposed ordinances for our backflow program. Megan Wilson Outcall is our senior manager of the water quality group. I almost said water resources, haven't been reassigned. She will kick this off. It's an information item. There's no action the board needs to take, but there is council action coming up. So as we go through this item, if the board has feedback, we will be sure to carry that forward to council as we go. Megan.
Good evening, board members. Appreciate your time this evening. My colleague Michael Parrish is going to go into details about what backflow prevention is, why it's important, and what our code changes are that we're proposing. I just had a few kind of high level comments to make. We're regulated by the state of Colorado for a backflow prevention program. And I'll say it's an administratively intensive program to manage. It requires a lot of detailed tracking, customer service, follow-up, and enforcement to ensure that the city is in compliance with these rules. We have a team of 2, and they end up spending a lot of their time, the majority of their time, following up with customers and enforcing for the relatively minor number of customers that don't readily come into compliance. So ultimately, we're hoping that these changes will shift to fewer enforcement cases over time so that the staff can work more proactively to do customer outreach inspections to ensure we have these backflow prevention devices where they're needed. Michael Parrish and our other staff member, Mike, really work on compliance assistance and prioritize working with customers. So you'll hear more about this. If a customer needs more time to get into compliance, or they're working through HOA board approvals, or need to brainstorm solutions, like we're totally willing to give time when we can within the state requirements. Unfortunately, sometimes we do have to escalate enforcement. Again, our overall goal, and it might seem counterintuitive when you first hear about what we're proposing, but our goal is to reduce enforcement over time. So I've been supporting this program. So I will turn it over to Michael Parrish, our water compliance program manager for backflow.
Thank you.
With less of a little question.
They're mostly disappearing.
We'll roll with it. It's a couple boxes. So yeah, yes, my name is Michael Parrish. As Megan said, I'm water quality compliance program manager in the backflow program. Utilities department, and thanks for giving us a little time to update you on these backflow code updates. I know everyone was dying and excited to hear all about it. So backflow is the reverse flow of water. In this case, water from private property back into the city's water main. So obviously that can carry contamination, and to protect public health and our drinking water supply, we have backflow prevention, mainly backflow prevention assemblies, kind of like this picture here that you see. most non-single family accounts, all metered irrigation accounts, all fire lines, they're required to have a backflow prevention assembly. And the vast majority of these are privately owned and maintained. As was mentioned, the state of Colorado through the CDPHE sets the backflow prevention program baseline requirements that we have to meet, and all suppliers in the state have to meet. And so that means that the city is really playing an enforcement role in trying to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect drinking water. We have to ensure that the appropriate backflow assembly, appropriate type is there for each cross connection where it might be needed, that it's adequate for the hazards present and such. And if it's not, it has to be installed within regulatory timeframes. We have to track all of the backflow assemblies that we are tracking as containment assemblies. There's about 7,800 or so. And we have to make sure they're tested annually. State requirement is we have to get 90% testing ratio each year, and no individual backflow assembly can go 2 years without being tested. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of tracking and follow-up and Excel spreadsheets that have magically been put together to help us try to track that all down. And backflow assemblies, if they fail a test, they need to be repaired or replaced and retested within regulatory timeframes, which is a long way of saying there are many different ways that we can get a backflow violation from the state. Us as the city of Boulder could receive that violation. Any violation we get, we must notify all of our water customers, which has the not insignificant cost of sending a letter to everyone, but also the very significant impact of potentially decreasing public's trust and confidence in their drinking water. So enforcement is how we get there. And what our main enforcement tool at this point is the threat of water shutoff. Hang tags are what we use. That's a little yellow tag that warns folks on their door, hey, 10 days, water will be shut off if we don't come to an understanding or an agreement and resolve whatever the situation is. City did not do much enforcement with hang tags before 2023. In the graph here, you can see light green is 2022 cumulative percentages month over month. And then in March 2023, we started using hang tags to get our numbers up to where they needed to be. And as you can see, there's a big difference, and hang tags do really work. The threat of a water shutoff is a impactful tool for us. It also has a lot of downsides. Like, we spend a lot of our time, staff time, tracking who needs a hang tag, hanging the tag on the door, talking with the customer there, follow up after the hang tag is out, calls if we're getting close to the shut off date and we haven't heard from folks. So it's very time intensive for staff. And then we're finding now, a couple years into it, there's certain property managers or companies that are waiting to get a hang tag to do anything, which is problematic. And then really significantly, if we're looking at people who would be very impacted by a water shutoff are not the ones who are responsible for scheduling a backflow test, a tenant in a multifamily building or something like that. So really our goal with these code changes that we're proposing is to try to reduce the number of tags that we have to hang, and all while still meeting our state requirements. So these specific fees and penalties, hope that people comply on time before a hang tag even comes out. Hopefully we'll keep them sticking to their schedules and agreements that we come to together, and then account for staff time. Kind of in tandem with the code updates, we're also bringing forward a city manager role, and that'll have an earlier deadline for irrigation backflow testing for August 1st. That being, we have a limited time window to work with for irrigation and backflow testing. If there's no water to the backflow, it can't be tested. So once things are winterized, our only enforcement tool is blocking off a meter, which is a huge time intensive operation for staff, both in the fall and then in the spring on the first warm week when everyone would like to have their locked meter back on to irrigate again. So really trying to cut that down, and that's been fairly successful in practice, but this city manager rule, I think, will really help establish that. And like it's kind of been mentioned, if we can spend less time enforcing a minority of customers, we can do more site survey, more proactive inspections, get out more educational sides of things. So it would be a really nice change for staffing as well. So these are the proposed fees and penalties we're thinking to bring in, and I'll get into how these will kind of all fit into our overall process here in just a second, but to come up with these numbers, we looked at what other front range suppliers were doing, and these are fairly mid-range. Some are charging a little less for a hang tag, some are charging much higher penalties right off the bat. So we feel good being kind of middle of the pack there. And it's not too dissimilar from other BRC enforcement programs where in terms of how quickly things escalate, the financial amounts. So we feel good with that. $58 backflow hang tag fee, working with the finance department, just accounting for staff time and FEMA vehicle rates and sorts of things. And then these tiers of penalties, and we'll jump into that. This will be one example, one of the main things we're doing, tracking annual testing. So this is how we kind of go through the process and what these new fees and penalties will hopefully give us here in that final right-hand column. So once something's due, we send them a postcard saying, hey, don't forget your backflow's due for testing. If we get a schedule from them or we get a test report from them, it ends there. If we don't, then the next month we say, hey, you're past due for backflow testing, and we hopefully get a schedule or a test report in. Assuming none of that happens, at this point we hang a hang tag for shutoff, this yellow water shutoff warning hang tag. Currently, there's no financial cost to getting a hang tag. That would hopefully change. The hang tag for water shutoff is something that we take very seriously. We don't mess around with that. We don't take it lightly that this enforcement tool is a very blunt tool. We've hung over 1,600 tags over the past year and a half, 2 years, and we've had 13 occupied domestic shutoffs. And so that really speaks to the amount of effort we go through to try to reach people, calling people random phone numbers from test reports from years ago to see if they still might be associated with it. We really go out of our way to try to avoid water shutoff if we can. That $103 fee that you see there, that is if the water is shut off. And so if we can agree to a schedule, which is what happens in the vast majority of the cases, but that's not impacting the customer. That's only for the water shutoff. And so now we have a schedule we've agreed upon, and then we don't hear from the customer again. The schedule time comes and goes that we're not able to communicate with them on as to why. We have to hang a tag again to get a schedule out of them again. It doesn't happen often, but the amount of time we waste kind of running in these circles is kind of disheartening, and our time could be better spent doing more productive things. So the thought is, if we have a penalty associated with breaking a schedule, no communication, no follow-up, anything, that would come with a penalty. And if we do that whole routine again, it would come with a higher penalty. And this example here is fairly similar to our other processes, a failed test that needs to be repaired and replaced and hasn't been in the right timeframes, or an install that needs to take place and they're not responding within the required timeframes. It's a similar process. The difference being for those that have more of a public health impact, a non-functioning or non-present backflow assembly, we start with a higher penalty. So we would do $650 for that first one, and then $1,500 for the second one. That's the main meat of it. The rest of it, we're looking at just clarifying some language in code to better match state regulations and such. The city manager rule, in addition to the August 1st deadline, also just clarifying test submission deadlines for test companies. We've updated our website, we've updated our auto reply to the email, and our email signature has a link to it, so anyone who's emailed us in the last few weeks has gotten that reminder, but then we'll have targeted outreach to property managers, testing community, updated communication letters explaining what the new fees and penalties are, and more importantly, how you can avoid them and not have to deal with them at all. Going to council on November 21st and December 5th. And if all goes according to plan, both city manager rule and code changes will go into effect in January of 2025. Thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Michael.
Just one quick question. I'm curious if the second postcard, like you're late, is now gonna have like the thread of if you don't do it, we will charge you?
Yeah, we haven't drafted any of the new materials yet, since it's not yet in effect or gone through council, but yes, I would assume that even the first card will say, hey, if you get a hang tag, these charges will come. Our main goal, like if we could, I would love to never charge one of these penalties, but also never have to chase down someone for a second time or a third time to try to get a schedule out of them. So.
As someone who procrastinates on my renewal every year, like the moment I get one that says you're gonna have to pay it, like, okay. Get into it, so that's awesome.
Do you find that it's a lot of the same people year over year? Is there kind of a?
There's definitely some trends, I would say. Often what will happen is we'll eventually get to the point, like you said, there's 13 domestic shutoffs. If we have someone who really isn't cooperating over time and we've tried working with them, we've hung tags, we don't get really enough of a schedule, we go through the process and we do shut their water off. The next time they get a reminder, they're much more responsive. And so there are a cast of characters who are familiar, but there's not just one small cast of characters.
Are there any fees for like multifamily apartments or anything if water gets shut off for like not paying this, or it's just kind of on them to get it back on?
So the shut off fee that we have in backflow, it's the same for the billing shut off fee. So if someone actually physically goes out to the meter to shut off the meter, that fee includes the fee to shut it off and to turn it back on, but we would only charge that if we actually go and shut off the meter.
So there's like, it's just, I guess, because you alluded earlier to like these multifamily areas where it's really the tenants that are suffering if it doesn't get paid, whereas there's no like accountability there other than we will shut it off.
Yeah, it's a pretty blunt tool.
Yeah.
And I would say we recognize that gap, whether it's multifamily or tenants in like a business park area. And it's something that we're working on in our communication to try and flag for the people who might be the business owner or the tenants, like, help us get in touch with this is serious.
Yeah.
I mean, and for us, at the core of it is public health, and the requirements are there for a reason. And from my knowledge and what I've learned about areas of utilities that I hadn't been exposed to before I was in this role, this is one of the most complicated things to meet the requirements. And the testing standard that Michael mentioned, 90% of those 7,800 devices have to be tested. And I forget which year it was, but it used to be 60%. And it is a hard standard to meet. And I think just when I was hearing this presentation before tonight, and it really struck me, the 1,600 hang tags and 13, but only resulting in 13 shutoffs, just the amount of unproductive time that staff spends. And for me personally, to be comfortable with this, I was interested in like, how does this compare to other penalties the city has for other things, or other municipalities, and I feel like we've established something that benchmarks okay with those things. And it's not, as Michael said, we don't want to spend it's not in our value system to feel great about the penalties and fees, but it's public health and it's a regulatory requirement, and we take seriously meeting it.
To add a little on the complication, would you consider like different rates for different meter size, or is it all just same per customer, same per meter size?
I would hesitate to get into meter size in terms of just the cost is associated with the staff time spent in the operation of painting a tag or following up in some way. And then, I mean, I don't know for sure, but the fairness issues that could come from a small meter that's going through this process versus a large multifamily residence, and how that would shake out, to me gives pause, but I don't think it's something we've really considered as a program to change it based on meter size.
What's the like equity consideration when I asked the questions? It just sounds like it's not a little bit about that, and there's really no way to kind of like do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say no way necessarily, but I think that we can find ways to have a more equitable approach in other formats. If we're talking with someone and they're like, hey, I'm really struggling to get the money together to install a backflow, we can work with them on that as long as we're within our state guidelines. And if they're communicating that to us, we're happy to. Like that is something we will go above and beyond. If they're working with us, we'll do everything we can. It's the folks who don't, and then when we start running up against state deadlines, that we have to be a little bit more serious and go pain tag approach.
Do the test. Is there like, do they have to hire someone to do the test?
Exactly, yeah. So I mentioned briefly, but yeah, a key part of this, it's privately owned and privately maintained, and then they hire out third-party certified backflow testers. And so the cost of a test, there's a whole range of what people are charged. I don't know what the best price is. I see when people send me their receipts instead of their test reports. I've seen it everywhere from 60 to 70 bucks for a test, up to people charging 300 plus a trip fee of $100 plus everything else. So there's a variety based on the companies, and there's a good number of companies operating here.
And then if your test isn't good, you've got to replace your system.
Yeah, you don't have to replace necessarily, it depends how it fails. There are some that can just be repaired fairly straightforward. There's some that do eventually need to be replaced, and I mean, that's why they're tested every year. Because the mechanical assembly eventually, over time, will start to fail.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate the presentation. It was pretty exciting stuff. It's all your short story.
No one, I didn't see everyone here, but I didn't see anyone that said fall asleep, so.
Thank you. With that, we can move to matters from the board. So, do you have anything to bring up tonight?
You?
I do not, so we can move to matters from staff.
Yeah, and I can be really brief on this. I mentioned in the beginning, based on public comment, that we had the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan kickoff event this past weekend at the Dairy Arts Center. It was really well attended. There were staff from various departments there with a little station set up where people could come by and get questions answered, provide some initial input on what the community was interested in. There's a big auditorium there, and there were some events in there. And so it was a good event, and the comprehensive plan is the overarching policy guidance document for Boulder Valley and how it affects utility. There's a lot in the current plan around planning and growth, elements for the city, service levels, things that impact our utilities. And similarly, council is discussing the planning reserve in Area 3 on the very north end of town where the little go-kart track at the Gateway Fun Center or whatever. And so they're related, and we're actually, as a staff team, have been supporting the planning department on some of those studies. And so that's all gonna be coming to a head here in 2025 and 26, I believe. And our water supply policy will be something there. So there will be things for RAB to work on as well as we go through that process. So just wanted to flag that for you. And then in the really good news department, council unanimously approved the budget last week. So I really appreciate the board's work on that every year. It's a lot to kind of go through those items and work with us on our materials and presentations. So really appreciate that. And as they were doing their deliberation and getting ready to vote, one council member commented on her appreciation to see all of the investment in our infrastructure and just how when you don't do that, you end up spending more on emergency repairs. So that was nice to hear. I think that's what I have for matters for tonight. And if you'd like, I can go to the upcoming agenda. And a couple of, I think they'll in November likely have an information item, a brief one on the lead service line in inventory. Good news and a lot of good work from the water quality team again on that. As well as an update from Joanna Bloom on our billing portal, the software that we use for our billing system. We're about to make a long overdue change there. And customers will start experiencing that towards the end of this year. So that'll likely be a matters item. And then looking at the upcoming agenda, I think we had noted a potential action item on Nederland wastewater IGA. I don't think that will be ready after all for November, so we'll be moving that out. And then the thought was to do the November board meeting at the 63rd Street water treatment plant and do a tour of some of the capital project work that we've had there over the past couple of years. So probably be a brief business meeting like we did for the MSI tour and then a tour of the facility. If that works for the board, we would not envision having a meeting in 2024 and then likely in January, be back to our year in review, which I cannot believe we're almost through another year, but it's the way it goes. So that's what I've got on upcoming schedule.
Great, thanks, Joe. With that, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yeah, motion to adjourn. Second.
David? Meeting is adjourned. Thanks again, Debbie, Michael, for the presentations.
Yes,
Really
thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
And everyone else as well. Thank you.